And I want people to get attached to garments because then you take care of them better. People really don't need to wear so many clothes. Every t-shirt that the Western community consumes, you have to think about the ecosystem. You're taking away 3 years of fresh drinking water from Bangladesh. For Bangladesh, it's not a very new concept or being circular.
Today we're talking with Mahenaz Chowdhury. She's the founder of Broqué, a textile upcycling company in Bangladesh, and she's a zero waste designer. Mahenaz has been working with handweavers in Bangladesh really actively to figure out how they could become part of the commercial textile supply chain. What's really interesting about this particular conversation is that Mahenaz highlights that there's a massive supply of dead stock in Bangladesh. So essentially textiles that are produced for consumers, but that are not actually sold in consumer markets. And that dead stock has to be used somehow. So there's an opportunity there for using that waste in a more effective way. So we're going to dig into that. What's also interesting about this conversation is that we're going to look at how the relationships that we as citizens or consumers have with clothing is one that has commoditized clothing. We don't really care about our clothing as much as we may have in previous generations. We don't nurture them as much because they've become so readily available. And the question that we're going to unpack a little bit is, should that relationship change? Should we look at clothing in a different way? Hope you enjoy the interview, and don't forget to subscribe. Mahenaz, thanks for coming in. You are the founder of Broqué, and I'm really curious to hear about the business model and how you run things. I know you're based in Dhaka. Maybe we can start off by just, what is Broqué? What does Broqué do?
Sure. Thanks for having me. So Broqué is about upcycling pre-existing clothes.
Okay.
So it can be in two ways, like the garments that we already wear, and the other is the garments dead stock that are available in the market as well. So I started it off in 2019. And the sole purpose was to kind of share the joy of wearing pre-existing clothes, like hand-me-downs, and kind of embrace that culture of like wearing hand-me-downs as well. Between my friends and family, it was like very popular, like when I was in high school, and I thought like with the emergence of like social media and Instagram and like constantly wanting to wear new clothes for your social media engagement, that sentiment's kind of like completely lost amongst us. So I wanted to kind of bring that back. And then when I started doing all these clothes swaps and these events, and I realized that there's a lot to do with the garments dead stocks as well. And that is where I can really be creatively involved in expressing my artistic values and work on the garments as well. So the business model is kind of, it's a very basic like business model, like for-profit business orientation.
Okay.
But the idea is that in supporting the communities that I work with, for example, like the weavers communities, like for example, the Jamdani and the hand embroidery communities that I'm working with, the idea is to connect the Bangladeshi traditional crafts practices with the concept of upcycling in Western attires that I'm more comfortable like designing. So that's kind of pretty much where I am.
So what's dead stock?
Dead stock is basically the garment surpluses that are overproduced basically. And these are fresh materials that have been untouched by the production companies, right? So they are usually, like technically they're supposed to be burnt off, or what happens in Bangladesh is that we use it back into the value chain. And all these small garments companies and like brands, they use these like dead stocks to like make their own stuff.
Okay.
So,
and I guess it sometimes also gets sold here in Bangladesh.
Yeah. So they're mostly like sold back into the system over here, and that kind of allows like small garments companies to like work with those existing fabrics that are available. So you can get them in Shodorghat, there's this area called Mirpur Jute Poti. So it's called jute actually. So it's all the leftover.
I've heard about this. This is kind of that informal economy of like the leftovers.
Exactly.
Right.
So per se, so if you think about it, like the garments industry has been in Bangladesh since the 90s, right? So we've kind of always practiced that circularity since then. So for Bangladesh, it's not a very new concept of like being sustainable or being circular. Like we've kind of always practiced that as a
Nice.
byproduct. Yeah.
Okay, and this concept of jute, actually, it's something new to me. I'd never heard of it till this trip. So it's really interesting. How does this work? Is there like a whole informal market that exists for this? And you go and buy the produce, and I'm assuming that you get it for like a really good price, or can you tell us a little bit about how that system functions?
Sure. So, I mean, so what happens is that from the garments factories, like there's these surpluses that are taken out, and it's within that system as well.
Yeah.
And that gets pushed into this informal market, which is called the jute market, right? And you can get different sizes of fabric, different types of fabric. Like, for example, there are cut pieces, or they're completely fresh yardage of fabrics that have been untouched.
Okay.
And so you can either buy them. So typically, you buy them like per kg wise, like so.
So these are not finished, like.
No, these are not
goods.
Finished. Okay. Not at all.
Which I guess also exists in these markets, but that's a separate.
Yeah, I think the finished ones like gets into, say, like the bongo bazaar is where you get all the rejects, right? Or like the surplus, overproduced numbers of T-shirts that are probably not necessarily that they all have defects, but like say they've just been overproduced. So what would the companies do now? So, and you have to kind of overproduce because you want to safekeep. There could be so many things that can happen in the system. So you want to kind of have that surplus. So that gets pushed into these bongo bazaar, or for example, say like Artisan, and then Westex, Pretex kind of worked on that whole model that, you know, bringing
like
back the samples. Yeah, exactly. Like all the samples and like these things get there.
But you focus on the fabric side of
I focus on the fabric because that gives me that liberty to create my own designs then. Cool. So the limitations with just working with pre-loved garments is that you can do some alterations, you can probably like upcycle them in like different ways, but if you want to like take apart the full fabric, like it's just wastage of that entire process, right? Because you've already created a whole system to like produce that garment, and now if you're taking that apart, you're putting in more time and resources, and then also you're working with that fabric. So so to me, I thought that it would be much simpler to like work with the dead stocks as well, and continue to work with like the clothes swapping events that I do, so you don't have to like kind of throw them away.
How do you see this as clothes swapping? So
what happens, like for example, like I'll host an event and I'll invite a lot of my friends and families to like come down, that hey, you can bring down like 5 to 10 pieces of clothes, which are fairly good to like wearable products that you wouldn't mind like wearing yourself, right? But you're not wearing it anymore, and it's just like sitting in your closet. So somebody else might be like, you know, wanting that. And so why not like exchange? So you have some clothes, I have some clothes, and we exchange. And that way, like I get to wear something that is new for me, and you get to wear something that is new for you. So that's kind of like the idea that, you know, you cut back on consumerism in that process and really not have to buy new products constantly. So, and with the dead stocks, you have the full liberty to like express yourself as a designer, as an artist, to like create your own designs.
So we have this in Holland as well. Like there's a massive focus on like vintage clothing, on swapping clothing. Like at the university, we often host clothing swaps between the students. And how's the kind of cultural attitude towards this? Are people cool with this here? They're cool with like swapping clothes, you know, because I know some people in Holland aren't cool with this at all. Like the idea of buying or wearing someone else's clothes somehow feels weird. And other people are super comfortable with it. Do you feel like there's some change in that, or what is your opinion on that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Back when in 2019, me and this other friend of mine, we kind of started the whole clothes swapping culture, like, and then that kind of like spurted into like the thrifting culture as well. So since then on, like I think we have moved in a positive direction where people are okay with wearing secondhand clothes and not be afraid of that whole stigma. I mean, there are people who kind of have that stigma, but I think like in the newer generation, that stigma is kind of like not such an important factor at all. Like for example, there's an interesting thing actually, like, so you know, in like for example in Holland, the reason why vintage or like thrift functions better in some ways more than not, because is that you get very interesting brands, very high quality brands,
and like unique pieces often.
Very unique pieces, but in Bangladesh, you don't get those products here at all. So the value chain is very different over here. Like all the best products are always sold abroad or like taken out, and you get like the rejects or the other markets fabrics like over here. So which are not necessarily like those high end vintage kind of clothing. So what happens? You're
thinking of like luxury brands and stuff.
Yeah, all the luxury brands, let's say, or even like H&M and stuff. Like we do have a lot of H&M products, like secondhand, like for example in Doja markets and stuff, because those are like the rejects and stuff. But for example, like if you want to wear Balenciaga or like other brands, like you wouldn't necessarily
you won't get that
those.
so easy. Or it's like in very small circles.
Very small circles. And so what happens is that in Bangladesh, like the thrift component is a very different set of clothes or like price ranges of clothes, right? So we get a lot of influx of Korean and like Chinese secondhand clothes in Dhaka.
Interesting.
And you get them for like $40 from $20 to $40.
So
to
what
like
kind of clothing are we talking about?
Like dresses, t-shirts, shirts, scarves and stuff. Scarves you can get for like $20, literally, like really nice printed.
Isn't there a market for? So when I, like whenever I come here for wedding season, sometimes I would get clothing made, right? And it's quite common that people get a lot of clothing made, and these are kind of, in a way, essentially bespoke pieces.
Yeah.
That sometimes you only wear for that one time.
Yeah.
Couldn't you like thrift that? Because that's like that you could kind of see that as a little bit of a unique, the luxury or the local luxury market. Does that happen?
Sure.
You know,
it does happen. There are certain Facebook pages that operate like that as well. Like there's these recycle bins, and like there are multiple Facebook pages that have these groups of selling their luxury products, like you said, like the wedding garments and stuff. So it's kind of going well, I think. Like there's a market that actually does go for that, and even like suits and stuff. Like for example, like young college students, like if they want to get access to like nice suits and stuff, they buy it from those places. So
interesting. So this is, if I hear it correctly, you kind of have a few, let's say, business models within Broqué. One is more the thrift side, and one is more this upcycling side.
Yeah.
Correct? What's the financial model for the thrift side, or is this not necessarily the financial model for you?
It's a very small component to that. It's more for the community building than to like bring into my income model, because it's a very small amount, right?
So it also creates like a network for the other side of Broqué.
Exactly. Okay. So it gives me that connection with the audience, and it helps me to kind of talk about circularity and sustainable fashion with this audience as well, right?
Oh, cool.
And it's a good way to like kind of get to know your audience as well. Like you spend some time, you talk about it. So my events are different than the other events in the sense that I usually like to have a conversation with the people that I'm giving my clothes to. Like it's not just like, oh, the clothes are there, take whatever you want. Like, no, I want to know where my clothes are going. It's kind of like finding a good home for my existing clothes, because these are clothes that I've had for like a very long time, and I've taken care of them. So it's not like I'm not attached to my garments. So
we get attached to garments.
Right. And I want people to get attached to garments, because then you take care of them better and you will wear them for longer periods of time. So these conversations you can't do like when you're selling on an online platform.
No.
Like not necessarily.
Cold almost.
Yeah, very cold. But I try to practice these conversations when I'm with these people, like up front. And even when I'm the other segment, like when I'm doing like the upcycle, and it's mostly like custom or like made to order. So
the upcycling is mostly made to order.
So I'll have like the sample design done, and then I will do it to your specific sizes and requirements. If you want to tweak some things, like I'll be able to do that for you. So that's kind of like the thing that I try to bring into my model, that I don't want to just create like 100 products and not know what to do with them, when I can like actually have like a better conversation with these clients and make it for them, so it's more customized.
Nice. Do you feel like that customization also maybe adds to that, the value that you have of you want to encourage people to love their clothes and take care of their clothes.
And feel special. You're like,
Right.
because you can buy like 100 t-shirts like from wherever, like the same product, and it necessarily might not fit you that well. But with my brand, like you're getting something really cool, like for example, like hoodies and t-shirts and shirts and trousers or whatever, like, but
You brought
size.
something, right? I think.
Yeah, I did.
Let's check that out.
So yeah, so
Is this custom made in a way, or
this is completely custom. Like I haven't sold this in the market. So this was like kind of a pilot that I did for Goethe Institute for a local international program. So it was a fashion design exchange program between Germany and Bangladesh. And so this was kind of like my concept. So, but these are the things that I want to kind of do, like working with like different sizes of fabric.
And you have all types of fabrics here as well.
Yeah, like this is an old gatha, like sari that I know this person like who had this.
So
sari,
this is what someone ordered. Like this is actually.
This is no one has ordered this yet. I haven't put this on the market yet. I'm still trying to figure out how to kind of do it in a better way that's feasible to like do the custom order, because this takes a lot of time.
Right.
And also the fabric arrangement, the types of fabric that I will get also puts into like, like if you wash it, I don't want them to like bleed into the other fabrics and stuff. So they're kind of those conversations as well. But the idea is that you work with, this is a very standard hoodie structure, but my contribution on the structure is that I'm translating my artwork onto it with different kinds of fabrics. So that's kind of like the idea, that you work with like standard designs, but I will make it my own in my art style, basically.
But you make this fully from scratch.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah, like this was
is
a
not
garment.
like a rejected hoodie that's.
Oh no! Like all of these materials over here, like garments, deadstocks that I collected, and these tiny fabrics were from the small tailoring shop like in my neighborhood. And I was like, because they throw away like
all
bags
those
of
trimmings
those.
And stuff.
Exactly. So I was like, why don't you give me like 2 bags of these? I just want to go through and see what works for me,
Cool.
And then I went through that. So that's kind of like how this came to life.
What do you think? I'm just like, whenever I talk with people, I start to think in terms of like new opportunities and stuff. So you kind of mentioned there's this surplus fabric market, and then there's the reject market or the surplus clothing, like already ready-made
finished product. Yeah.
What if you personalized finished products? Like gave them a new spin? Do you see potential in that?
I have actually thought about that. What happens is that, for example, not all the sizes are the same, not all the fabric qualities are the same. So that kind of like makes it a little difficult.
Okay.
But that's always a good starting point, like, because then you don't have to go through the whole process of like manufacturing, taking that time.
The hoodie, for example.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good way to go about it. Like, I have not done that for specific reasons, is because you can't have control over the quality of the fabric always. Basically, like, you don't, like, the sizes can vary. That's why they're kind of like
less
the reject.
customizable.
Yeah. So.
Oh yeah, the reject, sometimes the stitching is off, or like the shoulder is off.
So then you have to go through like 500 pieces to like kind of, not, I'm exaggerating, but like, you know what I mean? Like kind of go through a lot of pieces to like get, actually this might work into, because all the labels are different as well sometimes. So even if they say like XL, it's not necessarily XL, it might be small or medium. So
like,
I've been through those situations. I was like, I think it's better if I just make my own standard sizes and stuff. So yeah.
And you mentioned this connection to hand weavers.
I have another example to like kind of show you that. For example, like this bag, right? Like I also do fanny bags and like moon bags. So this is also like a garment's deadstock, right? Like the twill fabric.
The white
fabric is a garment textile. This is an overproduced buckle, right? This also slider is an overproduced. So
there's also markets for those components.
Absolutely, like all of these things, like the zipper over here and the zip tie, right? Like these are all.
This is strange, because you would think a like this. What do you call this?
Like the buckle.
The buckle is,
for example,
like it's always going to be relevant. So why does it become surplus?
Because say, for example, like every company wants to make their own style, right? Or their own colors, their own sizes. So, and even like this 12 fabric, this was also like a surplus. So I had to individually get all of these 5 components separately. And then, for example, inside I use a Defta, which is a waterproof lining.
Okay. Yeah.
And then also like this.
That's also surplus stuff.
That's also a surplus. And these were like different sizes and different colors and cut pieces, right? And so the lining over here, like, so this tape is also like a surplus. And I got them in like different colors and everything. So you can't really have, like, you can get everything, honestly, like in the secondhand, in the surplus market, like the jute market, basically. And I think like the magical part about this is that you create a collection based on the availability of these things in the market, right?
Yeah.
Because, for example, this is only available in 500 pieces, so I'll buy the full bag. Or maybe I'll buy one of the
buy
things.
it in bulk to a degree, essentially.
To a degree, because I know that this will be used in all of the bags that I'm going to be creating for in the future. For example, this one. So I'm giving away all my trade secrets now, but it's okay. For example, like this buckle size will come in different sizes. So you may not get this particular size the next time when you go back to the same shop. So I'll buy it in bulk. And the idea is that you match this with this fabric, or either way.
So then you basically find, you might take one buckle and go like around to actually find the right.
That's the problematic part. That, like, people don't want to go through that. Like for large orders, like you don't want to, like for example, 5,000 pieces, like you don't want to kind of go through this process.
But it's actually cheaper? Like the price
much cheaper, really cheap, because then if you buy it in bulk, like you get a really good price for these things, right? But what happens is that, like, then you just have to constantly keep matching all of the things together. Like, for example, it took me a really long time to match this color of the zipper with this. You would get like very bright white or like other colors or like very deep beige. And I'm like, no, I need to get something that goes with this and not stands out. So those are kind of like the small challenges when you're working with this secondhand market or the surplus market, basically. And that's when you go in like bulk production. You're like, you know what, I'm just gonna make everything from scratch, and then I have all my sizing made to this. Right now I'm doing sizing based on what's available in the market. And I think that's a great way to work because you have so many surpluses available to go through. Like, it's crazy. Like, I think if you guys go down to those areas, it would be fun exercise for the students as well to like just get inspired by the colors, the variation, and the ranges of stuff that are available.
There, wow. Yeah. And is this surplus market like mainly a local market? Do they sell internationally as well?
I don't know. I mean, no, it's local.
It's mostly
very local. Like, but these, so in a way, they're selling it abroad because the buying houses are buying it from them, and they're doing the orders for like Videshi clients, or like international clients and stuff. So in a way, that kind of like
that works.
But the handwork stuff that you were talking about. So this is a old sari, right? That was stitched into a katha fabric by this other organization that I work with, Basha.
I know Basha.
Yeah. So Robin, so we did a collaboration of like, I designed these fanny bags for her. Oh, cool. And then we had, so we're continuing that collaboration as well.
So this bag was sold through Basha?
So we have that, so the leftover 4 bashas, I use them in my so there's always that never-ending circularity of like wastages and stuff. So what happened was that, so I used that over here because I only had a few pieces of these katha fabrics, and I was like, I don't want them to like go to waste. And these are beautiful, and these are all hand stitched by these women that she works with in her organization. So
you remind me of, how like you have these people that go on the beach with one of those metal detectors and finds these little treasures. Like you go to all these places and find treasures and then like bring them together.
Totally. Oh, that's a cute way to put it. And then, so that's the katha stitch. And then, for example, this is another this is a local marking fabric, right? And it's surpluses that I've worked with. And then this is the hand-stitched, hand embroidery work that I do with the women
this is done by
Dhaka,
women
in Dhaka. So that's
Dhaka.
another community that I'm working with. So I have 3 groups of women that I work with for hand embroidery work. And you know what the funny part is? Like when you do machine embroideries for the same thing, it'll cost you way more than than when you're working with the hand embroidery women, right? So I'm like, why will I give more money to machines?
What's the downside?
Huh?
What's the downside? I guess you would have. I guess with the women doing it, you might have less like perfection. If
That's
you
the
want
beauty of
no, I agree with you. Yeah, true.
Right?
Then
So
every piece is a little different.
You would be surprised, and I think that's what makes it unique. That every piece is your own piece. There would not be a. I mean, obviously it's the same design, the same structure, and everything, but there might be a slight difference in how the teeth is done, for example, right?
So this one I find really intriguing. So I know that there's this whole space of people that are working with hand weavers here. And I know that some of the ambition is to bring hand weaving more into like the mainstream market. From your experience and judgment, how do you see this happening? Do you feel like there's a space for hand weavers and we should create space for hand weavers?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that should be the primary objective of anyone who's working in fashion or with textile. Because I think we're so immersed in the garment sector, and you know that it's I mean, not in Bangladesh because we're recycling everything, we're reusing everything. There's a whole circular thing happening. But for consumers abroad, they're the ones who are creating so much waste.
Right.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Right? But the impact of that is that we are living in a country where our natural resources are being scarce for their waste. So it's not fair for us. But when you're working with the hand weavers or the hand loom community, there is really no wastage happening per se, right? Or the consumption of resources that are being taken from here, it's not that much at all, not even a fraction of what these industrializations
exactly,
does.
Even if you look at it from a machinery perspective, like this
the
type
amount
of machinery
water,
you need,
electricity, right, gas, everything.
Even at some point, the machinery gets old. It has to be thrown or recycled again. And with hand weaving, I think a lot of those issues change.
Absolutely.
But with hand weaving,
it takes a lot of time.
It takes more time, which would mean that the consumer also has to create a different relationship with clothing.
I think exactly. I think you said that. You said a very important thing. We really need to slow down consumption. The solution is not constantly to reproduce and recycle. That is not the solution. The solution is to really reduce the consumption so that there's no need for recycling at all, or really reduce down the need for recycling by tenfold. You know what I mean? And that's why my narrative of my brand is that I work slow. I want to build that culture of slow. I make my clients wait. And my clients are okay to wait because they know how much hard work is being put behind in making one piece for them.
Yeah.
So it's worth that wait. And it's happening slowly. I never thought that customers in Bangladesh would be okay with waiting, whereas they can get everything in a snap of their fingers, because we are in a market where you can get t-shirts for $20.
Yeah, exactly.
You can get t-shirts for $50.
Fast food.
Exactly. And you can order something that can get delivered in 24 hours for you. So I think that's a phenomenal achievement for a brand like myself to see that change in that consumer perspective. But it's very small, but it's there. And I think that's a positive outlook on that. Yeah.
I think when we get to circularity, right? When we speak of textile circularity, if you look at it not as this utopian idea, but something that's achievable, you would somehow have to slow down. But we've had, how long have we had the fast fashion industry? 20, 25 years or so,
I guess? 90s, right?
Something like this.
30s, yeah.
Let's say 20 years. So it's not super long either. That we've gotten used to that behavior. So part of me is also thinking but if we've been doing this for 20 years. That doesn't
Only
mean
20 years.
it's nothing.
Right? Yeah.
So we should be able to flip it and reverse it again.
But then there's capitalism and that constant need.
Yeah.
Right? So how do you, I mean, we're living in such a corrosive capitalist community where these garments factories and garments industries, I will speak about the industries in a way that they're okay to pay very minimum wage to the laborers by justifying that, oh, we're creating employment. No, you're creating employment at the cost of slavery. This is this is neo-slavery, right? Like, you cannot be okay with the fact by making hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of profits by saying that, no, but we're creating such a healthy working environment.
But how would that be different with handweavers?
Because then the idea is to like give a better working condition and give them a better wage, right? Like, we want to live in a community that understands and values the craftsmanship, values people as people and not just as a replaceable labor.
So then we're talking about quite some changes, right? We're talking about, let's say, a change from more industrial machinery to more traditional machinery, but we're also talking about a change in price. We're talking about a change in pace. So there's quite a few things that kind of, let's say, things that exist that would have to be shifted quite fundamentally.
Yeah, or if there's a way, I mean, I'm not saying necessarily that machines are bad. Obviously, we need newer technologies to make it better for the community to work with those kind of tools, but the tools should not take away the craftsmanship.
Right.
I mean,
this topic is very interesting because craftsmanship, I kind of translated as well to a bit more freedom of expression or creativity, which I think with, if you're working in a garments factory, I wonder how much of that you have space to do to create like your own designs and stuff. And I think that that's also a bit of a topic in circularity. Like, how do you empower such a big industry to kind of that every aspect of the supply chain, so not that you have more design work in Bangladesh, for example, that Bangladeshis have more freedom to be part of the design process to make sure that, I don't know, that a designer in Europe, for example, understands how hand weaving could be incorporated.
Exactly. I think that would be like a game changer. And I think you kind of talked about the solution in its way as well, because how do you solve 1,000,000 outputs like with hand weaving? That means like we need more craftsmen in that system, which is great because then we're creating more job employments for the craftsmen and raising the value of craftsmanship as well.
But we would have to reduce demand because otherwise we would move to a model where we just turn the craftsmen into the new
labor, the garments industrialization as well. So the answer in itself is that we slow everything down. People really don't need to wear so many clothes, honestly. Like every season you need clothes.
But that's like the model that we've moved towards.
Yeah, but it's for the businesses to make profit. Like when you introduce something new in the market and then there's social media and that influencers and that musicians and celebrities like endorsing that entire narrative of that, oh yeah, what am I wearing today? I hate those kind of content. Every day, do I really need to see what you're wearing every day? Do I need to learn from somebody else on how to wear clothes? Like we're all like conscious human beings who can think for ourselves and can do our own lining, right? Like we can do our own styling.
Yeah.
Why do we need to look at other people and be like, oh, I need that brand, this brand, that thing, that shoe, 1,500 different products like in a month to like feel like I've accomplished something. So I think we've developed this narrative so that we can't get out of it, and it's fun. Like it's an endorphin release in your brain when you see like 500 likes on your post for that particular reel that you created out of like all of these products. So it's I think there's a massive connection between psychology and consumption and fashion, and it is very smartly done. Like very smartly done. So in order to like kind of undo that, we also kind of re-engineering that thought process. But
a couple of days ago I was reading about circular marketing, which is essentially the idea that there's a need, and if we want to achieve these kind of movements, that there's a need for the marketing aspect of the entire business supply chain to become a lot more involved in it. Because right now what happens, if the brand demands some sort of circular promotion or branding or whatever, it's done. But it's still done in the same style, it's still kind of trying to hype the product style as it always has been.
Yeah.
Whether it's a circular product, a sustainable product, or just a mass consumption product,
It's a product
it doesn't matter.
End, right?
They still sell it in the same way, which is that kind of, the colorful, addiction, gambling
buy
style.
5 new jeans because they're upcycled. Oh my God.
So we'd have to change that, which is really interesting that so many aspects of the supply chain have to change. It's fascinating.
Yeah, but can you imagine, just in 20 years, we've kind of destroyed all the good things that were there in the way we consumed and looked in things and valued things. Right now, we just look at a garment as just a product which can be replaced by the next purchase. But people don't associate that with every purchase, there's that entire value chain, that entire supply chain that is being that's in place, and that means, for example, just for an example, I'm sure the audience already knows, the students already knows the fact that when you're making one t-shirt from the cotton farming till the end of the product finishing, you use about 2,700 liters of water, which is equivalent to about 3 years of clean drinking water for one adult.
Right.
So if you put that in perspective for a country like Bangladesh, for every t-shirt that the Western community consumes, you're taking away 3 years of fresh drinking water from Bangladesh. Why aren't we kind of looking into that resource depletion in that manner? Why aren't the industrialists focusing on that narrative, that how are we depleting our natural resources, depriving the community that these industries are built in from access to these very natural things that they should be getting. That is their right of a standard living, a healthy living. So because we've completely diminished the value of life and human beings, and not just human beings, it's your animals and your entire ecosystem, right? You have to think about the ecosystem. You just can't constantly keep consuming and feel like I am going to leave this country and go for vacations abroad and not have to deal with all these problems that the community people are living with, because I don't have to be affected, because these people don't feel the empathy because they're privileged. With privilege comes that complete ignorance of understanding what is going on within your community. You don't care.
Right.
So, but before, when you were working in smaller scales, you know the people you're working with, where you're working with. You had with the craftsmanship, basically, with the handloom, with the traditional sector, you have that opportunity to get to know everybody. All these women that I'm working with, I know individually all of these faces and these people, right?
Yeah. I kind of get the feeling when I speak with you, there's a massive demand in the West, and they're wasting clothing, and that's causing resource deprivation here. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
I think 80% of export from Bangladesh is the garments industry. So there's also kind of a dependency here in terms of economic value on that, let's say, clothing consumption and addiction, right? What are your thoughts on this? How do you then, if you were to change it, that would also imply that. My thoughts on it are essentially, I feel like now Bangladesh is a production country and doesn't have that much say in how to do it or what to do. They're just kind of producing for another, and it would be nice to see how we could empower Bangladesh more to be more on the innovative, creative side,
and on the design side.
On the design side, to get a bit more ownership of the entire supply chain. But it still doesn't, for me, necessarily answer the question of there's this massive demand. Won't it always be met? Won't there always be someone who wants to meet that demand? And won't there always be this nature deprivation,
Yeah, I mean, it's cost of opportunity. I'm obviously for economic development, but not at the cost of standard of human life.
Yeah.
I mean, that is why there are policymakers, that is why there are researchers and industrialists who have all these educated people and academics in this entire system to kind of think about how to do this better. We have to, like, for example, like, fashion is a very colonial thing, right? Like, we have not been able to get out of that colonial dialogue of, or that mindset and that infrastructural framework where we can reclaim our crafts and our designs and our strength as ourselves, and then make that into the process of that design making, right? We're just a manufacturing country. People don't come to us for designs, right?
Which should change.
And that's what I'm trying to do with Broqué, that I want to stand out as a Bangladeshi woman who's working as a designer in this community and wants to showcase Bangladesh as a very profound designer hub, because our crafts is our art, is our designs, right? And we've been doing this for centuries, and we need to kind of focus on that as well. But with the economic development, why aren't we also focusing on this development? Why is this only dependency on manufacturing? Why are we only making all these couple of these industrialists rich, and we're continuously feeding into that system, right? Why aren't we looking into this entire sector of small businesses and craftsmanship that are completely neglected by the government policies, by any regulation bodies? There are no policies for these people. There's no minimum wage for these people. There's no standard of practices for these people. Why aren't we looking into this massive sector that is actually, like, because you see, like, these are under the poverty line, right? Like, these are communities from different remote areas, and we have this in numbers across the country. These are the majority of the people. So that has a massive pool of craftsmanship and art and designs and people that we could empower and bring them into the economic development as well.
It's an interesting thought. I liked what you're saying a lot. I think it could be really interesting. Sometimes I'm a bit of a realist and sometimes more of an idealist. But like, coming back to what you just said, what you could do is you could say, okay, realistically, the demand of the West is the demand of the West. It's not going to change. But what if the demand of the West was such that the West demanded that happened, what you described? That would be very interesting, because then you don't have to take care of the let's say that relationship. But if let's say if an H&M was to say, like, no, we don't want mass consumption, we want,
say, only 5,000 products with different kinds of hand embroidery,
and everything has to be slow, and everything, that would be really fascinating, even if it was just a line, just to promote that, to see, because then you'd have this really cool collaboration across the supply chain of, like, the demand side, and the marketing would also feed into that, and you'd have this whole new experiment, essentially.
That would be really, really
Shall
cool.
we do it?
Actually, let's do it. I'm all for it. Like, I would love the people that I'm working with to get, because that's the idea, right? Like, you connect them to the future needs and the future ways of thinking of how fashion is going to move forward. Like, right? So, yeah, that would be amazing.
Cool. Thanks so much.
No problem.
This was good.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Thanks.